All right, welcome to the Win All Day Everyday podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. We're in episode 5 already. Last week we had Scott King, associate coach with the Moose Jaw Warriors, and our skills coach at Prairie Hockey Academy as our guest. And today we got another legendary guest, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to talk to him and get to know him a little bit more. And hopefully he's got some great advice for all of our listeners out there. Then we'll move into some story time and some guide provide and everything else. But my name is Barrett Kropp. I'm the host of the show. My guest host is Justin Simpkins, and we're going to kick it off. Justin, who's our guest today?
Excited to introduce a friend of mine, and Adrian Valaca. So Adrian's the Director of Performance of Gary Roberts High Performance Training, joining us today from Toronto, Ontario. The Big Smoke, right? Home of the Leafs. And so we're excited to have Adrian join us. Adrian's got a pretty cool story. He trains some of the world's best in the game of hockey. And he himself was an MMA fighter, and I don't know if he'll get into those stories or not, but yeah, he's got a lot to offer. So excited to introduce him to our listeners. So let's do that. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I think last time we met was at a restaurant downtown Toronto, and I wish we had a podcast rolling for that dinner. But this is the second best thing.
Yeah, that's right. I have some notes, so at least we'll have some future topics. We'll bring you back to to shoot that second one.
To tell them.
Yeah, Perfect. That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Adrian, introduce you a bit. Obviously, you're a strength and conditioning coach, but the overall director of performance at Gary Roberts and the high performance training. Tell me a little bit about that. You've been there since 2011. Tell me about your job, maybe even how it's evolved into where you're at today.
Bit of background. I grew up Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, steel town, blue collar. Everyone played hockey, so I did play hockey myself. I was not particularly good, and I hated to practice, which is hilarious now. I love to train though. I just hated the aspect of going out and practicing or power skating or doing anything around it. So it's funny that I've fallen into it now. When I was 17, I got beat up in a locker room. That led me through a Joseph Campbell-esque finding yourself journey into fighting. I had started to fight at an amateur level at that point, and I was looking for a way to get down to Toronto because the training was just so much better down here. And there happened to be an opportunity to work with Gary at his training facility. Lauren Goldenberg, who's a man in my life that I owe a lot to. He's a strength coach in Ottawa. He used to be a strength coach for the Blackhawks, St. Louis, the Canadiens, so a whole host of NHL teams. He ran the ACC, and I had done an internship with him that previous summer. He called me one day out of the blue and just said, "Hey, Gary Roberts is looking for a junior coach. They're expanding their business. I think you should go interview." And at that point, I had some knowledge of who Gary was, but it certainly wasn't super well developed. Even as I watch more hockey now than I did as a kid, that's for sure, because a lot of our friends and clients play. But even as a pro fighter, I didn't watch a lot of pro fights. So I have an eclectic sports interest. I'll watch all of the Tour de France, but yeah, exactly. I'll watch all the Tour de France, but I won't watch 82 Leafs games during the year.
So Ethan just became our favorite guest here. The Tour de France comment. That's great. It's good.
We can go into that. I was there this year, so you'll love that story.
Oh, okay,
but
that's great.
Yeah. So I knew kind of loosely who Gary was, but my old man was super excited. My dad's a diehard hockey fan, so he was really excited. He's like, "You got to go." So I came down, met the team, got along like pretty well, and they hired me. So that was kind of the start of it. At the time, we worked inside of a facility, so we had it was called the Fitness Institute. The squash courts, they had blown the 4 walls out of the squash courts and they turned it into our gym, which was great. At nice high ceilings, it was really open, really bright, but there was glass all the way around the outside. So it was, kind of the fishbowl, so to speak. So we'd have like these top players, like Stammer was, he was the best player in the world at that time, in the gym training. And then there'd just be this line of old guys, like kind of wrapped around the entire glass, like kids with their faces pushed against it, like watching what was going on. So yeah, it was a great place to be a part of. That was kind of my first intro to professional athletics, and and getting a taste for what that was all about. And then we kind of transitioned from there. So we left that facility. They were selling it to Good Life at the time. There's a bit of a bit of a transitionary falling out period. We actually went back to Gary's house. So it all began at Gary's house with Stammer. He retired. And yeah, you guys, you'll have to get Rob's on to tell some of these stories because I won't do them justice. But he had just retired playing the game. Tampa wanted him to stay down, Stammer, to stay down in Tampa to train for the summer. Stammer didn't want to. He's like, man, I want to go home, see my family. So they reached out to Rob's and they're like, hey, will you train this kid for the summer? And that was kind of the genesis of Gary Roberts training and what it is today. So Steven was client numero uno. And I mean, he's still with us today. And he looks, I haven't seen him look this good in 6 or 7 years. I'll say that. So he looks unbelievable right now. Out of this world good. It's insane. Like so strong, so fast, dialed in. It's been really, really fun to watch. But that's kind of how it started at Gary's house. And then as it grew, they transitioned into this facility and we actually went back to his house for a period. So I felt so bad for his wife, Michelle. I'm sure his kids loved it, but man, there's like 35 guys coming in and out of the house all day. And the way it was set up, the gym had a quasi separate entrance. So you walk into the door, and there was like a little bit of like a front area, like kind of, I don't know, like a foyer, I guess. So it was like entrance to the garage, entrance to the house, and then entrance to the gym. So thankfully guys didn't have to walk through the kitchen and the living room. It's not like they were that, intrusive. But nonetheless, like the door would open and you'd hear like the beep, beep of the door opening like nonstop all day. Guys come in and out. We'd be in his backyard, like running sprints in the backyard. And and unfortunately, St. Andrews College, there's an opportunity to move into that facility and it's just out of control. Like it looks like a U.S. college. It's a high school, but Dave Manning's done a great job on their program and it's got a lot of clout at least in the Canadian prep school system. So we operate out of there now, 25 to 30 players with pro contracts, whether that's NHL, AHL or Europe. And then, another, call it 70 to 80 junior players. So OHL drafted, going into your OHL draft year, which is that a year after the Western Hockey League? Is that right? I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, your 15-year-old year in the OHL. Correct.
Yeah. So this year, 08 players through college hockey, and then we have like 2 little satellite locations that are our younger programs. So kind of like 12 to 15, basically. And I think that 12 is kind of the cutoff for us in terms of age. I think I shouldn't say that. 10, 11 is great if you got a really mature group, but at 12, they seem to be focused and locked in enough that we can get some really good work done. So that's kind of the overview of the whole system. I started out as a pigeon. I did, all the grunt work, as I should have, because I had, I had nothing. I didn't deserve anything else. And then just kind of, over the years it progressed. I became a senior coach and then moved into a larger leadership role. And then myself, and then Lucas Azareta Lobo, who has already been out to see you guys, and Brian Duncan. So kind of the 3 of us oversee the whole program now, and each has our own area of expertise, so to speak. But it's been great. I mean, it's a team environment. It's a family environment. So that part's been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of a family environment, right? I think congratulations to you and your wife. I think you were recently married here, and obviously have a new daughter. And I mean, tell us about that. Sylvie, she works with you as well.
Yeah, so Syl is she's the mother bear of the facility for sure. I mean, she is the mother bear too now to our daughter Kennedy, but Syl runs all of our nutrition as well. So she oversees that component of the program. So we met, she actually hired me, funnily enough. So that's kind of that's a running joke. But we've worked together the entire time, and we've, had a relationship and a family together. So it's a really different environment, I would say, but it works really, really well. She handles all the nutrition. I don't step on her toes. I leave that to her, and vice versa. So I think inside of the business, we both have our areas of expertise that we focus on. But it's a great option to collaborate. And then the third piece of that, so Gary Roberts Performance, like FTR, Fuel Train Recover, that's our mantra. That's what we live and die by. If you don't have those 3 things, then quite frankly, you're leaving success on the table. So Syl handles fuel. Myself, Lucas, Brian, the team handle train, And then our therapists are on site as well. So we work with Mike Prebag, Melissa Givelos, their team, and a series of other wonderful chiropractors who I'm missing here just for the sake of time. But that sets up this like beautiful little Venn diagram, and the athlete gets to sit in the middle, and then we have these three spheres that intersect. So if something's going on, and like Gabe Landeskog's a good example, he's home, he's doing his rehab. We can all talk. It's not like a Zoom meeting has to be organized and we need 19 people to come on. It's as simple as walking upstairs, like pulling someone out from the other room. 3 people can have a quick conversation about where he's at, what his progress is, what we're all seeing, and then we can break and implement. Right. So if you can cut down the time from idea to implementation, then you can be more successful.
It's really neat. I mean, that's great to hear the background and the story, the evolution here of the Gary Roberts brand. And I mean, you guys have really developed over the years. To me, it's easy to know and to read about, see that it just seems like if you are a top hockey player, especially in the East, or maybe from Germany, you're going to go to Toronto to train with Gary Roberts High Performance Training, right? That's what you're doing for your summer training, and you guys have really established that brand, and so congrats on that. And I think more than that, you've also established that reputation with each of the teams, and it sounds like the team doctors, right? Tell me a bit more there. You guys are pretty, just like you talked about with Gabe Landeskog there, I think you do that even throughout the season.
It's probably team specific, I would say, because some teams are great. And some teams are, a little bit more closed off and a little bit closer to the heart, so to speak. And I understand that too. I mean, the last thing you want to be told is that you're not doing a good job. And, I think if someone comes in externally, it could feel like you're being told that, but that's really not the intent. If you get hurt during the season, you can rehab with your team. There's lots of good teams. There's lots of good therapists, lots of good strength coaches, team doctors, everything. But it's hard because there's 26 other players and you're one of 26. I think the big advantage that we have is that you can come back and be one of one, right? Or one of two. Yeah. So we do get a lot of players home for injury that then go back to their teams, and I think if you do a good job with 1 or 2 of those players, everything kind of opens up and it becomes a much friendlier relationship, and we can compare notes back and forth. And I would say with of all the teams that we interact with, 75-80% have this beautiful working relationship. And there's probably like 20% that have a lot of friction, but that's pretty good, I'd say, considering the environment.
Absolutely.
So Adrian, what's the genesis on the connection back to Prairie Hockey Academy, and we've through COVID set up our high performance training center and whatnot, and you guys with Gary Roberts Training Center have been an integral part of setting up our programming and even training our head strength and conditioning coach with Dustin. So just talk about that story a little bit. Justin, what was the very first touch point? Maybe can you clarify this for me?
You know what, I mean I have to go back and look at an email, but I want to say I threw just a inquiry email into you guys' website back in like summer 2019, and I got an email back from somebody, which was you actually, and so we just started that. We had a phone call and started having a conversation. And I think at that point, Adrian, we had plans that you were going to come and visit in like February of 2020 or March, somewhere in there, and then this pandemic broke out, and we just started to build a relationship more on Zoom. We never actually got you here on site, but that was kind of I think that was the start of it. And I remember we texted you videos and pictures of our old gym space that we had, and we're like, how the heck do we make this better?
It's funny, Barrett. It's really funny. There's certain interactions in your life that you think are throwaway interactions, until later, right? So that's probably one of them. Like I might have answered 10 of those emails, and only one of them actually came to fruition into this relationship that we have now. But I do think, I think that we're in a very special situation here in Toronto, dealing with the caliber of athlete that we work with, and if there's an opportunity to kind of like help spread that in any way. I've also never been to Saskey, so I think that was probably like a big part of it too. Like I've been, I haven't been to Newfoundland either, but I've been pretty much everywhere else. So I'd never been out to Saskey, so I thought, this might be a great opportunity to go see part of the country. And I do love Western Canada. So I think that Western Canada reminds me a bit of the US, and that there's like a fierce independence for Western Canada despite being part of a nation, which we don't have in Ontario. So that part I really, really like. And then, yeah, obviously we had Dustin out here as well, which was fantastic. Our doors are always open. That's one big thing. I don't think we have no secrets. You know, I think everyone does the same thing, quote unquote. I think that the information is readily available to everyone. Just how you execute on it and how you coach it is probably the differentiating factor. So our doors are always open. So yeah, when you guys reached out and said, "Hey, we're coming down to Toronto. Can someone come visit?" Like, absolutely, the doors open. Come on down. And we got to learn some stuff too. It's not like it was a one-way street. I got to learn all about gifts sent inside of group chats on player signings, and I got to educate our boy on why Matthew Tkachuk is one of the best hockey players in the National Hockey League. So, you know, it was a very fruitful week, I'll say that.
Well, as this relationship with you guys and Prairie Hockey, I wasn't at Prairie Hockey at the time. I was on the other end of the world there in Vancouver. And I'd recruited Spencer to come play for me. So Gary's nephew, Spencer Roberts, came and played for me at Trinity Western University.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
It's really unique now sitting here and seeing how all those worlds kind of collide now. And the hockey world's so small, right? And I love how you talk about it's open. There's no secrets. We love to just help each other out and progress our programs and move things forward. So I really appreciate that comment.
Well, speaking of a small world, you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were in Czech, right? Working with their national team, like in Prague. Is that true? So I was just in France for a camp with Propulse out there, and we had four Czech guys. Two are based in Prague, but all four of them played in Trinity. So they were out there, and I was like, yeah, since I've gotten home, I've gotten nothing but text messages from these guys to come to Prague and watch them play hockey. Oh yeah. So yeah, I was the world. Oh, amazing. So one of the players, I think Daniel Wojciech, I think. So he won MVP this year for the Czech League in their playoffs. He's like 103 kilos, so it's like 227, maybe 228, something like that. I think he could play in the National Hockey League tomorrow. Like, he's so good. I was blown away at how good he was. And I think that's just kind of like eye-opening. It's like, man, there's so many good hockey players in the world. Yeah. But for him, it's like, well, why would you leave? You know, like, you leave to come over and get a two-way. And then, you know, like, what if the team's like, oh, you don't understand the game yet? Like, go in the HL. And then it's like, well, why did I just leave my family and kids back in Prague to play in, I don't know, Rockford or whatever. Yeah. But, yeah, the hockey world couldn't be tiny.
Yeah. Well, speaking of best players in the world, I think one of those guys, you're working with them now, aren't you? Tell us about Connor.
Which one?
That's true, right? Yeah.
Fair. Yeah. That's right. There might be a younger one, you know, challenging the older one, right? But
we have two. Yeah. Bedard just got here 2 weeks ago. So he's with us for all of August and a little bit into September, I guess.
Well, that's great because he played in Regina, just 40 minutes away from us here. So, you know, our listeners are going to be very familiar with him and what he did out here this last year.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll talk about both of them. I'll talk about the ways in which they're similar for sure. They both love the game of hockey more than 99.9% of players that I know. That's for sure. Like, they're just so passionate about hockey, both of them. I think the other thing so my first day was Connor's first day, McDavid's first day. So we had the same first day together. So we've known each other for a long, long time. You know, he's a very close friend. I'm very fortunate to have that relationship. And Connor Bedard now reminds me of McDavid back then. And McDavid still needs to be pulled back. He does too much, or he has a tendency to want to do too much for sure. But he's maturing now, and he's starting to understand his body, and he's, understanding the value of rest, and he understands that if taking the dial back a little bit right now means you have to turn it up later. Bedard's just going through that process, so he's just learning that. They're very different players, that's for sure, in terms of the way they play the game of hockey, but their approach and their commitment and how serious they are about it from a very young age is very, very similar. So Bedard came to our facility, I think when he was 14, maybe, with his agency, and Gary didn't let him train because his hips were so tight and so bad that he wouldn't let him skate and he wouldn't let him train. So he sent him upstairs, had him get treatment, and then made him stretch for the whole session. So this guy flew from BC to Toronto. He thinks like I'm going out at Gary Roberts' training facility, and Rob's just completely shut him down. He's like, "You're too tight, kid." So since then, he's taken that to heart. So now he's got like this amazing mobility and stretching routine. He's super mobile, super loose. But at 14 or 15, like he's like, okay, I'm doing this from now on. So he's committed to that. Now 3-4 years later, he's put himself in a way better position to succeed. They're both strong. Bedard's release is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like I think he scored 4 goals in our Friday scrimmage. It was insane. I was like, man, he just fires the puck. But he trained. So he trained in the morning on Friday. And then he had like some accessory, like arm farm work. And he's like, okay, I can't do it right now. I got to go. Like, I don't want my hands to feel terrible out there. So he skated. Then he came back into the gym. Then he did a little upper body accessory work after the skate. And then he went upstairs and ate. And he's like, what should I do now? I'm like, well, you should go home. And then I go upstairs and I look out the window and I see him shooting pucks out in our like little shooting stand. And it's like, well, you've worked out, skated, worked out, had lunch, and now you're shooting pucks, and it's Friday, and you've trained like since Sunday. So like maybe go home. On the flip side, McDavid, the exact same. Like trained, skated. What are you doing? I'm going to Pilates. Okay, go to Pilates. What do you have after? He's like, oh, I got to go do whatever. Like I got another skate later. So yeah, they're both just wired different.
Interesting. And you say wired different, right? Here you are working with other star players, NHL All-Stars, Stanley Cup champs, and but these two are just wired differently. And one of my questions I probably had from you is what you get to see in all those different levels, from some of the the high school, the OHL players that you work with, and the pros, varying levels. But it's the margin to move from one league to the next is pretty small, yet it's a big jump. Like, what are you seeing that separates people to get to that next level?
You have to have your base skills. You need to be able to like shoot, pass, and you have to be able to think the game. There's no question about it. If you can't think the game, you have to move 1 million miles a minute. Basically, like you got to be the fastest player in the world, almost. But then I don't know. There's just there's a mindset component to it. So, I mean, this is a pretty good example, I think. So, last off season, like it's kind of like late August, I would say, or mid August, and like we're in the gym. And Ty Dellandrea is in the gym. So Ty plays for Dallas, played a lot of like big minutes this year for them, like had a good playoff for sure. And like Rob's is like, what do you think about Ty? And I know like the least of hockey of everyone on our staff, like, at least our on ice coaches and all of that. And I'm like, man, he's going to play in the NHL. And he's like, why do you say that? I'm like, he just is, like, just the way he carries himself, the way he approaches it, the way that he goes about his work. The way he thinks about competing, like he's going to play in the NHL. He just is 100%. So then this season comes up and he plays in the NHL the whole time, misses like 2 games for a broken thumb, and then plays in the playoffs, plays up and down the lineup, plays some first line time, some third line time. And it's like, well, like why? It's like, oh, it's just the way that he approaches the game is a big separator. Like he acts like a pro, and he's acted like a pro since the very beginning. So that's everything from nutrition to training to recovery, and most importantly, probably compete when he's out there. So Ryan Winterton's my next call. I'll put it out here on the podcast. Ryan Winterton's, he's going to be a good NHL hockey player. I don't think it's going to be this year, but it'll be the year after.
Okay. That's interesting you say that. Scott King was our guest last week, and he's been working with Prairie Hockey Academy since year 1, so he's going on to his 7th year with us. And with the Moose Jaw Warriors, I remember a few years back they had a really strong team and some top end draft picks, and he just said Tanner Jeannot will be the best player he's going to play in the NHL. And and I was like, why do you say that, right? And he's like, he just carries himself differently. I mean, he's even after a home game, he's the last one out of the gym, or out of the arena. Like he might go and do some work. Maybe it's mobility, maybe it's some accessory. He's the last one out. He's a professional already at this age. He's going to play.
That's awesome.
And you look at Tanner now, and he's.
What's his nickname? He's got a hilarious nickname, doesn't he? Like, because where's he from in Saskey?
I don't know his nickname actually. Oxbow.
The Oxbow Ox. That's I think
The Oxbow
that's
Ox.
his,
There you go.
yeah, or like maybe not his nickname, but that's what the press writes about him.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about it, 100%. You can like sense it. Yeah, you can sense it for sure. The way that they carry themselves, and I think having young players like a guy like Bedard, like he's undoubtedly going to be a superstar in the National Hockey League. Like one of our guys got off the ice and he's like, man, he's the fourth best player on the ice out there today. And it's like, well, who's above him? It's like, well, McDavid, Draisaitl, and Stamkos, and like he was number 4, right? So it's like pretty good company to have. But for him, it's like he gets to watch the way that Connor competes and the way that Leon competes and the way that Steven competes. And he gets to be close to that. And I think that is just, that's invaluable. Just an understanding of the way that they approach it and the way that they carry themselves. And yeah, it's less about the skill at that point because they all have it, right? Now it's about, kind of belief, right? Like, do you think you can do that? So.
Talk to me about championship mindset. I mean, Adrian, championship lifestyle, right, would be the company of yours that you had started and founded. Yeah. And I think this is a bit of, some of the work that you do with the Designs for Sport Academy and doing a lecture on this idea of a championship mindset. Maybe just tell me a little bit about that. What's the problem we're facing today and how do we rectify it?
Yeah. So I got really sick for a 6 or 7 month period, probably, well, now I'm 7 or 8 years ago. So my whole family's got a history of hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, and I had fought. So cutting weight is terrible for your body. It's probably one of the worst things you can do in athletics. So I went through a training camp. I had cut weight, and for listeners that don't understand fighting, that means that the day before you fight, you have to weigh in at a set weight. So that you're contractually obligated to make that weight. So for myself, I fought at 145 pounds. If it's a non-title fight, they give you a 1 pound buffer, so 146. So I would weigh in at 146 and then I would fight at 162. So, it's the math. The math doesn't seem real, but that's when I would walk into the cage, I'd be about 162. So I've done a training camp, fought, cut weight, fought, won, and then had like a pretty good fight opportunity come up 6 weeks later. And I said yes, which was probably in retrospect a terrible decision. You just can't run your body that long without downstream consequences. So I go through training camp again, have a bit of a rough training camp, don't feel great, cut weight, have a terrible weight cut. Like I feel like I'm like passing out basically. Weigh in, fight, lose in the 3rd round, go home, really beat up. And usually, the first week after is terrible. And then the week after that, you start to feel better throughout the month, but that wasn't happening. So I was losing weight. I was like still weighing like 150 pounds. Which for me was, it was probably 13 pounds under what I should have been. And my heart rate had jacked way up. So my resting heart rate was up around 110 beats a minute. I was sweating through my clothes. My hands were shaking. So I tried and eat soup and it was really, really bad. So one day I was at home with Sil. I'm like, I got to go in and get checked out. And I remember I had to go to the doctor's office. I had to walk up a flight of stairs. When I got to the top, I had to get a key for the washroom because I was sweating so bad from the exertion that I couldn't imagine sitting in the waiting room. Like doctors' waiting rooms are so stuffy to begin with. And here I am like leaking. So I go into the washroom. It's a single person washroom, thank God. Like lock it, take my clothes off and literally lie on the floor. There couldn't be a more disgusting story. Lie on the floor with my shirt off to try and cool down. So anyway, I had a few medical conditions, or one medical condition that was causing all that. They put me on some medication, which was great. I didn't want to be on it my entire life, obviously. And I think there's a time and place for everything. But just, at like 26, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be medicated for this my whole life. Surely there's something else I can do. A combination of traditional medicine and naturopathic medicine. We kind of merged it together and I started to get a lot better and it was great, but it was a gradual process. So I had 6, 7, 8, 9 months where I was pretty sick and I couldn't do anything. So I was looking for a project. And so championship lifestyle and specifically championship mindset just started out as me trying to work through my own challenges at the time. So that led me to stoicism, is like one of the primary drivers inside of that idea, and a bunch of different thought leaders in the space. And after taking all that information and like somewhat distilling it, and nothing is new in this world, so I'll say I discovered it for myself. And I couldn't even tell you exactly where the principles came from at this point, but as far as I can tell, there's only 3 things in the world that you can control, and that's your effort, your attitude, and your focus. So EAF, effort, attitude, focus. Everything else happens. And I don't believe that things happen to you. I think they just happen. And that's an important distinction, because if you think things happen to you, then you're a victim in your story. And you should never aim to be a victim. So those became kind of like my guiding principles. I would operate through those 3 subsets, and then obviously a series of other like lessons that my parents would have taught me over my entire lifetime. And those are predominantly Judeo-Christian lessons, because both my parents grew up in the Catholic Church. And so I kind of used them to guide my own life. And then as I was getting better and I was feeling a lot better, and mentally I felt really good despite the challenge, I just started to talk about it a lot more. And so that would be either in a Designs for Sports setting, on a webinar, on podcasts, or in smaller groups, like go talk to teams and stuff like that. And then so I was like, hey, why don't we start a podcast? Because you're doing this all the time, and I want to talk about stuff too. So we started the podcast, and that's kind of how it started. But those things still exist now, and it's been great. Like, we were talking before we started airing, I think, just about the kid breaking his stick and we had a kid who slammed his stick. The Coles Notes kid slammed his stick. He was being a big baby, and he was given a wooden stick with basically a straight curve. And the only person that can play with that stick, the only 2 people that I know of, are Sid Crosby and Leon Draisaitl, and no one else can play with a straight curve like that. But we had an instance, like even a couple of days ago. This guy makes a lot of money, makes north of $6 million in the NHL. I'll say that. And he was not happy because we didn't have a goaltender show up, and he flipped the puck over the boards the entire practice, the whole practice. Every time he came in to shoot on the net, he would just flip it up into the mesh and then fall down. Wouldn't shoot him shooter tutor one time. And he got off the ice, and we're talking, and I'm like, how you doing? He's like, I'm fine. I'm like, well, you didn't look fine. He's like, well, I'm upset. I'm like, yeah, I'm upset too. He's like, what are you upset about? I'm like, well, you acted like a child for the last 45 minutes. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, man, you play in the National Hockey League. You're on your 3rd contract. You make great money. You're a leader on your team. I'm like, you just showed all our kids in here that if something doesn't go your way, it's okay to just flip pucks into the mesh. Like, what do you think that says? And he's like, yeah, I think you're right. I'm like, no, of course I'm right in this instance. Like it's not because I'm some smart guy. It's because it's just not appropriate, man. So, I just think like going through and having a framework has given me a great opportunity to have those conversations with players. We got another young player, plays out in Western Canada, plays for Winnipeg's farm team. Same thing. He like threw his stick into the bench. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I missed. I'm like, yeah, and he's like, well, I'm mad. I'm like, yeah, me too. Like, go grab your stick, get back, like focus on your work and have a better attitude. Like, I don't know what to say. Do you think you're so good you should score every single goal? Is that how good you think you are? So that just being able to share those lessons, I think has been great. And now that I've gotten a little bit older, I can say it and have like a little bit more clout. When you're like 24 and you're trying to say it, like speak, I don't know if you can swear on this, but they're like, shut the F up. But then, now that I'm a little bit older, I have a family, I have a kid, help run a business. But in terms of what I think the big problem is, I think it's the same thing everyone's identifying. We have this complete loss of accountability and this inability to deal with adversity. And unless that gets fixed, like I just think we're in for a really, really miserable time for all these kids as they get older. They're not like, it's not just going to fix itself later. That's the big thing too. And that's why sports are so important. And that's why strength and conditioning, I think, is so important for everyone, because it's a microcosm. Where else outside of sport? I suppose that's not true. It could be any sort of like craft, any sort of pursuit. So it could be playing guitar, it could be woodworking, it could be sport, whatever it is. But I think sport's important because there's a physical element to it. You're forced to push yourself into a very uncomfortable zone. So unless you're in the movie Whiplash on the drums with your hands bleeding, maybe it's tough to get to that point in other actions. but you get to deal with problems with very little consequence, right? I do an assault bike ride and I have this target and I don't hit it. It's like, well, what's the, like, there's not really any downside, you know, like nothing actually happened to you. Like you're safe, your family's safe. You know, everyone that you love is still all right in this world, and you know you didn't bankrupt yourself. But it's a chance to try those lessons out over and over and over again. So that's why I think sport is just so important, and it's crucial.
Right, and for those of us that are maybe past the age of playing sport, you know, we need those targets.
Why would you
I think we need those targets, though, like you said, on the assault bike or something to push ourselves through that adversity, right?
You know, even if it's pickleball, you can still get out there and chase it around.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I was doing that all weekend. It's fantastic.
Were you?
Yeah.
How's your game?
Yeah. It's a lot better than it was a couple summers ago. I was playing my wife, and she dropped a really nice shot to the kitchen. I was nowhere near, and I'm young enough to be competitive enough, and I'm old enough to break, so I actually dove for the ball.
No.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I completely dislocated my shoulder.
This is what, like a couple summers ago?
Yeah, 2 summers ago. Yeah.
Right now?
No, 2 summers ago. I'm good today. I'm good. It's working.
Okay. Good.
But
Good.
no, I still get pretty competitive, even on the pickleball court. It's
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it's a lesson that it's a muscle, you know, like the ability to deal with adversity is a muscle. It's just like everything else. You have to continue to do it over and over again. It's not like you get through like one hard workout and you did it really well and you did it with class, and now you do it forever. It's like, well, yeah, the sun comes up tomorrow. Like rent is due. So yeah, so through our whole life we need it for sure.
With that champion's mindset, you know, in just a few days here, maybe even some centers across the country have already started their tryouts for the upcoming season. What are some things that you would say around that champion's mindset that a young, whether it's like a U15 or even, you know, a U18 going into their camp, maybe it's a junior camp, maybe it's just their local minor hockey team they're trying out for. What's 1 or 2 nuggets of a champion's mindset that you might be able to drip on them?
Actually wrote an article about it like quasi recently, and if I'm not mistaken, I should, I'll share it with you guys after so you guys have it. But
Sure.
But I had written a recent article just talking about success in tryouts, which is exactly that. And I think just keeping those 3 things like front of mind, like effort, attitude, and focus. I mean, at the end of the day, like there is politics and there is nepotism in hockey, and it's never going away because it's the same across all sectors, right? Yeah. So, but sport is still one of the places where meritocracy exists. And if you are outraged, like, can you imagine if I got put in the NBA lineup and got sent out there? Like, it would be so laughable. Like, it would just be such a farce that they'd like, get this guy off the court, put someone else on who can actually do the job. So I do think sports are one of those areas where meritocracy still rules. So for these kids, it's show up every day with a positive attitude, be a good teammate, work as hard as you possibly can, because you can't control much else, but you can control that. And then focus just on yourself. You know, don't get caught in politics. Don't get caught up in your teammates. Be a good teammate. Don't ignore them, but also don't worry about what they're doing. Focus on yourself, be a great teammate, have a good attitude, and then work as hard as you possibly can. If you do those 3 things at the end of the tryout, if you don't make it, then it's all good. Like, you know, you're going to be upset, obviously, but you'll be able to look back on it and be proud. I remember when, I tried out for a team, and I think I probably already knew I was going to make the team at the time. So I had been cut for a AAA team, and so I was trying out for one of our AA teams, and I knew. I shouldn't say I knew, but I was pretty confident that I was already going to make that team. And I acted like a little jerk in tryouts. And I remember getting off the ice and my father being so mad at me and like walking to the car, and he's like, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed that I had to watch you do that today. And then I was like, what? He's like, you acted like you were better than everyone. Like, do you think that's okay? And so I still remember that from the time I was 12, I think maybe 13 at the time. And that was the only thing I think he was ever really upset with me about in my athletic career that I can really remember. It's like, what, you thought you were better than everyone? You didn't think you had to try today? So yeah, if you take care of those things, you'll be all right.
Just to go back to, you know, to rewind here 10 minutes, and you're talking about that, you got some athletes that you've already listed, and you're already calling their names out that they're going to be a stud player in the NHL.
Ryan Winterton.
Winterton. There we go.
That's it. Yeah.
So what, talk about Ryan maybe. What is it? What are some specific things that he does in the morning when he gets up, when he comes to your training center? It's one thing for us to say, well, he's got a champion's mindset, but for a 14-year-old boy who's coming to play for my team this year, what does that actually look like in the morning, and then by the time he goes to bed at night? What has he done in those wee hours of the day?
Ryan came in, it just came off, so he played. He played in the OHL. They had a pretty deep run. Then he went to Coachella, been a black ace for them. They obviously went to Game 7 when they lost to the Hershey Bears. Shout out to Connor McMichael because he's one of our players. He won the Calder Cup. We got a cup party on Sunday, so 5th year in a row. Not the same cup this year, but nonetheless, still a cup party. So Ryan had been pretty deep, coming in. So he's a little bit beat up. So he, the biggest thing is that he's so responsive. He came in, we're like, hey Ryan, you got to work on this. Like your quads and your hips are way too tight. You're having back issues, like not issues, but like you're getting a lot of discomfort and a lot of tension through your back. You got to work on these. So he's like, okay, well, what do you need me to do? It's like, well, these are your 4 stretches and activities. You need to hit them in the morning when you wake up, when you're here, when you go home, and at night. He's like, okay, done. And he goes and he does it immediately. And we don't have to talk about it again. And in 3 days, when I'm like, how's the stretching going? He's like, good, I've been doing it. And it's like, how you feeling? He's like, I'm feeling a little bit better. It's like, okay, perfect. Then it comes from a nutrition perspective. So yeah, it's like you have to put weight on. You need to eat more. So he comes in, he meets with Sylvie, our nutritionist. She gives him a plan and he goes and he follows it. And it's not a question. On Friday, it's like, hey, he's a grown man. He's allowed to have some sociable beverages, but it's like, hey, just a couple this weekend, really light. That's it. Like you had a hard week of training. We got another hard week. That's something that is demonstrably negative. Like keep it on the rails, get good sleep, get rested, be ready for Monday. You see him on Monday, it's like, what'd you do? He's like, just went to college with the family, hung out, got lots of sleep, and he's ready to go. So yeah, it's taking information, it's applying it quickly. We talked about that at the very beginning. The shorter the gap from idea to implementation, it's the same concept. It's like, this is the principle, implement it. You implement it immediately. Well, now you get compound interest working for you over time. So for him, it's like, okay, I started stretching. Now I feel better. And then when he gets on the ice, he's a pleasure to have on the ice. And that's one of the big things. Like he's just so positive. He's having fun out there, but he's working hard at the same time. Some guys struggle to do that. They can't do both. They have too much fun or they don't work hard enough. But yeah, he's very aware of his skill set. If he makes a mistake, he doesn't take it too seriously. He's upset about it, but it doesn't impact himself and his teammates around him. Just gets back in, does another rep, goes through it. So those are the big things that I notice anyway. He takes information, he applies it immediately. And when he's on the ice, he's working hard, but he's a pleasure to be around. Yeah,
that's really neat. I mean, what you're kind of talking about, if we're talking about parents and their influence in their children's lives as they're 14 growing up to be a Ryan, you're listing character traits. Right. These are all developable things. So he's coachable. It sounds like he's positive attitude. He's respectable, and I think at the end of the day, he seems to show some humility as well, right?
For sure.
Just in the ability to take the advice and be like, okay.
He was one of the guys cut from the skate last week. I say that like there's a couple skates, but like from the big dog skate, it's like, hey man, we got too many bodies and you haven't played any NHL games, and he's like, yeah, no, makes sense. And like it's like the end of the conversation. Like there's no more conversation about it. It's fine. He could pout and just be like, "What do you mean? I'm like drafted to the NHL. I'm like a top player. I'm too good for these other guys that I'm playing against right now." So
everything you guys have going on in Toronto, you got 70, 80 junior guys plus all your NHL players in the European mix. What if a kid is from Flin Flon, Manitoba, and he's just got whether it's the time or the money to get to a Gary Roberts or to a PHA Center of Excellence? What are some tips and hints that you can give a family that is just there's just really nothing for them, other than making do with what they've got in their hometown?
You don't need that much to be successful. You should see some of the gyms that Connor and I have trained out of, like over the last 12 years, and some of the places. Like we've trained on we've trained on stairs, like just stairs, like just in some random play, like whatever. We're traveling for something. We're stuck somewhere. Like, hey, like, let's go. And now we're in the stairwell of a building, and we're getting it down there. Right. I think it's a misconception that things need to be fancy for them to be good. The weights weigh the exact same. I've been all over the world, and they're the exact same. Sometimes they're in pounds and sometimes they're in kilos, but at the end of the day, the weight itself doesn't change at all. So yeah, for those kids, I think it's not like, don't view it as a disadvantage. In some ways, I think you do have an advantage. You have less noise around, which is a beautiful thing. You can get down, get to work. There are tons of great training programs online if you don't have the means to work with anyone. If you have a little bit of money that you can invest in your career, maybe if you're the player, it's like, take a little accountability, go do a little bit of work, go work for 6 weeks and find an expert and pay for a training program, and it'll be a fraction of the cost because it's remote. I mean, kids can work with us for less than $600 for the whole summer from a distance, custom training program, ton of nutrition resources. That's not an insignificant amount of money, but it's also not insurmountable, so I think that for those kids, it's like, take some accountability, realize that just because you're not in a big center doesn't mean you can't make it. The puck's the same size and the sheet's the same size. So
yeah, that's fantastic. That's great advice. I love that part, that even the best player in the world has no excuse for not having a facility, just running stairs. I was in south of Moscow a number of years ago speaking at a conference, and it was at an Olympic training facility. So my mindset going in is it's going to be this Taj Mahal of workout equipment and just some brilliant plans are all laid out. And I get there, and it's almost like, other than maybe about 500 pounds of loose weight sitting in the corner, it was just this open hall. And this was an Olympic training center for wrestling, boxing, and other combat sports. And I'm just thinking, okay, I must be missing something. And no, they came in and it's all like body weight strength exercises and agility, and those guys just, like, they were putting in, and it wasn't just for the Russian athletes, it was for that whole kind of Commonwealth area of nations that were training at the time. So it's not, it's not like Russia has some little training secret. It's very common for world class athletes to put in that mindset of, it doesn't matter what we've got for facilities, as long as we're putting in the effort, we've got a great attitude. It's a crossover for all sports.
100%. I mean, I had a coach who was a master of sport. He was Sambo master of sport back in Russia, and he coached here in Toronto. And we would have gloves and wraps on our hand, mouth guards in, and that would be it. That's all we'd ever have, like, every day at practice. Like, nothing else came out. There was no, I'll rant a little bit about on ice hockey training, but there was no gimmicks. Like, there's nothing that bothers me more than when I look out on the ice and it looks like my kid's toy box was dumped on the ice. It's like hockey is played with your head up, and all of a sudden you put 100 things in front, and you made the complexity so high that my field of view has to be myopic in order for me to get through this drill. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I gave Almaz enough credit at the time. Even, like, it was just gloves and mouth guards and that was it. And we'd have amazing workouts day after day after day. It may be different and variable, and it would just, that was all that was necessary. So yeah, I think the training, quote unquote, of sport has really swung. The pendulum swung, and it needs to come back a little bit. I agree 100%.
Well, this has been very informative, Adrian. Lots of information. We're just going to take a quick little break, and we'll come back with our closing segments and a few stories. So we'll be back right after this break. All right, we're back from break. We're here with the Win All Day Everyday podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. and it's been a great segment. And Adrian, you've been hitting it out of the park with lots of great information for us. We're jumping into our closing segment of Grandpa B's story time, and I've got a slew of stories that I thought I was going to unpack and share, but the moment you talked about the Tour de France, it was just like
hijacked. Okay, here we go.
We're ready to roll. So tell us, like, for those that don't know, I love cycling. If I didn't, like, if hockey wasn't my job and career, I would be in the cycling world, or I was in the cycling world, and owned some bike shops and managed a semi-pro cycling team, and so it's not like I'm a stranger to it, but I love the sport, and I think the number one reason I love the sport of cycling so much is what we've been talking about today, the champion's mindset. You can be a good cyclist, you can have the best fitness, you can have the best equipment, but if between the ears you don't have it together, you can't even, like, a 50-kilometer bike ride becomes difficult, never mind a 3,000-kilometer one. So I think that, and for a hockey podcast, it might be dangerous for me to say this, but I think professional cyclists are the most mentally tough athletes on the planet. Or they're up there with them in terms of what they have to do in terms of their fitness. They're playing chess at 50 kilometers an hour with 200 other guys inches away from each other. And not many sports have their top athletes die on a regular basis, and cycling is one of those sports. So you've got to be able to set aside fear and all these other parts of your performance. And so that's why I want to hear about your opportunity to be actually in France for the Tour this year.
Okay, so I'm going to get into it in 1 sec, but you just said something really, really interesting. So you talked about mental toughness in cycling. Okay, so cycling is arguably the most well-tested and researched sport in the world. They keep track of everything. So some teams will release their data, right? So you could go on and you could see what their wattage is at any time, what their FTPs are, which is really, really cool. You can see their lactate levels. They test everything, but they do not test HRV. So HRV is your readiness score. So if you have an Oura Ring or a Whoop Band, if you're a player, they don't test your HRV during the competitive season. And that's because their riders know when it's time to go, basically. And they don't put anything else in their head. And I thought that was one of the most interesting things that I learned in the last couple months about the sport. So I expected that they had HRV scores going. Like every morning you get sleep data, you see how the guys are doing. They have none of that whatsoever. They wake up and they said, "Are you ready to go?" And the guys say yes or no, and then they go. So, so we found out dates at the camp in France. Andre Nestrasil, who used to play for Carolina, plays in Trinec, is one of Czech's top players right now. So he's a diehard cyclist fan. He's been watching the Tour as long as I've known Nesty, which is like 6 or 7 years. And not just like watching it, I mean watching every minute of every stage. Like that's his jam. So he saw the dates were lining up, and we were going to be there for stage 16 time trial, just outside of Chamonix, France, where we were doing the camp. Their media manager is friends with one of the therapists on Israel Premier Tech's team. So he called him and said, "Hey, I've got 4 Czech guys and a Canadian. Can they come out and hang out for the day?" So we're like, okay, this is pretty cool. So it happened to be, I'm actually pissed. I've got my hat downstairs. I might have to go grab it in a second, but I got my Israel Premier Tech hat. So they had an off day the day before the time trial. So it happened to line up perfectly. We flew in, we trained in the morning on Tuesday. Then we got in the car, we drove up, and they were just coming back from their coffee ride. So we're like, "What are you guys doing a day off?" They're like, "Oh, just a little coffee ride." So they did 55K and I think 1,200 meters of elevation just as a flush to get ready for the time trial. And they come back and they've got 3 Canadians on the team. And Michael Woods, who won stage 9, is from Ottawa, and he's a huge hockey fan. Used to play as a kid, played AAA, just wasn't big enough. He's a small guy. Wasn't big enough. He ran as a marathoner, then transitioned into cycling after. So he's like pretty fired up when he finds out. I start, like, the names were just falling out of my pocket. I was trying to get as much credibility as possible in as short a time as possible, so we didn't get kicked out. So he starts telling some great stories, like being in Ottawa, training with some of the guys. Char used to come out and ride with them. when he had some time off as well. So he'd go out, get on the bike, and Mike said it was hilarious. He's he's probably like 5'2", 147 pounds maybe, and you got the big Z behind him, so it would have looked like a Wes Anderson film probably. But yeah, they got another guy from Quebec, Hugo, and I'm trying to think of the third Canadian was. But anyway, they let us come stay. They showed us the bus. They showed us the food truck, kind of the bike racks. We got to talk to the therapist, just hang out for a couple hours. Just like a pretty cool environment. And these guys are coming in and they're like laughing. They're like, time trial tomorrow, so it's a day off for us boys, because they know that like it doesn't matter. Like it's not happening. So that's on the Tuesday. Wednesday, time trial's on. So the guys that hosted the camp, they live like 15 minutes away. So they're like, okay, I think we got the perfect place. So we leave practice, we rush to make the train. The train's just an absolute party. Just beers are coming out of everyone's backpack. Like not just us, like everyone, it's coming out. Everyone's drinking them on the train. We get to the spot and we've got to hike up. I don't know, maybe it's like 2K, like total walking. And there's probably like maybe 800 meters of elevation at the end. We get up, we kind of go around one corner, go around the other. And it is like the perfect spot. It's only 5K into the trial, so everyone's still fresh, like they're coming in hot. And we get to see them come up. They go into a right-hand turn, they straighten out, they go into a left-hand turn, and then we watch them go. So we're probably, I don't know, we get to watch them for 20-ish seconds, which in cycling is a long time. Like if we went to a different stage, like we would have caught the peloton, maybe the breakaway, and it would have been done. So the way the time trials work, and this obviously, Barrett, but they're inverse order. So the guys in last go first, and then it works down. So yeah, it's pretty, like it's a little, not, I wouldn't say subdued, but it's quieter at the start. And then all of a sudden they've got some the big dogs are coming up, but then like Pinot takes off. Obviously he's a French legend. So the place is going ballistic as he's climbing the hill. Who was KOM at the time? I think Giacconi was. So he comes off, like the place goes bananas, and there's these two little kids. They're probably 11 years old, sitting right across from us. We have our shirts off. I'll send you guys the clip after. We're on Czech national TV. They come around the corner, and it's during I think is it Pogacar's time trial maybe. Anyway, it's either him or Jonas. They come around the corner and you can see us there with our shirts off cheering, but there's these two little kids across from us and they are screaming at every rider in whatever language. So if he's German, they're yelling in German. If he's Italian, they're yelling in Italian. France, it doesn't matter. Dutch, like every single, they're like, the French guys come by like, allez, allez, allez. And their faces are like this close to the bicycle. Yeah. And you can see like the guys that are actually taking a stab at it, like they're cutting the right lines. Like they're tight to the corner. Like they're going for it. The guys that know, they're like watching, they're kind of in the middle of the road. But I would say from 30 onwards was just out of control good. Like it was amazing to see. And it's such a huge production, right? The choppers coming overhead when Van Aert went, like the chopper follows him the whole way. All you hear is and then he comes up, people are going ballistic. So it was one of the coolest sporting events I've been to. If I had to suggest for someone, I think time trial is the way to go because you get to see them for longer. We got to watch them climb, and just even just seeing the difference in the guys that are top climbers and the guys that were struggling was it was incredible, even in that little short sector. So that was my Tour de France experience. Just out of control good. Gosh, maybe it was stage 15, 14, something like that. So Woods is in the breakaway and then he pushes and then the guys have to follow and they get up to the top of the climb and you literally see them yelling at him. Like they're so mad. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you going now? We have 47K to go. And unless you understand the sport, you have no idea. You're like, well, just keep riding. Like, just keep riding. Like, why are you slowing down?
Well, even on stage 9 when Woodsy won, there's a select group. There's like 10 guys, and they're going up a 13 to 17% grade climb for 8 miles. It was ridiculous. It was so steep. There wasn't even out from 5 kilometers on. It was just solo riding. There wasn't a fan, no one in the audience. Wow. And Woodsy got dropped. He got popped off the group. And there was a guy that was, everyone's like, oh, he's going to win this. And all of a sudden, you just, on the chart, on the TV, you can see Woodsy's gaining, and all of a sudden, he, like with 500 meters to go, he blows by the guy and wins. And the mental toughness to be able to know that I had a chance to win this stage, and then I got popped, and for him to battle back, like legendary status.
Well, Nesty's such a fan, right? So he's like kind of fanboying when he meets him, and he says to him, and this is so funny because like Andre's played in the NHL, he's won championships in the KHL and Czech. He goes, hey man, like congrats, like amazing to see you win. It was tons of fun. He goes, you kind of started a little late on it though, eh? And Mike just looks at him and goes, yep. Yeah. we get in the bus or back in the truck after, excuse me, and Nesty's like, what did I say? He's like, I just panicked. He's like, can you imagine like him listening to me? Like, why are you talking to me about this right now? Yeah. But that was amazing experience. Watch the Netflix documentary. You won't regret it.
There's another one out on Cavendish has his own now, and Cavendish just signed with Israel Premier Tech for next year, so he can win that 35th stage and break the record. So, man, there's so many great things to talk about in sport. At the end of the day, when we're talking about all the conditioning, all the nutrition we've had our guests on, we had Scott King talking about skill development. Every sport has all these factors part of it. I'm excited about today because it comes down to your mindset, right? And having that champion's mindset. And even in business later on in life, you gotta have that mindset of being a champion. Our podcast is called Win All Day, Every Day, and we feel the same thing at Prairie Hockey Academy, that we want to develop leaders on and off the ice with the mindset of like being a champion in everything you do, on the ice, at practice, in film, in the weight room, in your relationships. And so that's why you see at our facilities Win All Day, Every Day, Splashed Everywhere. That's why our podcast is called that, because we want to make sure that we're doing that in our lives. We're trying to model that in our lives, and anyone that comes in contact with our program, they're going to see that. So I really appreciate you today, Adrian, for unpacking a lot of that for us and getting us excited about the Tour de France and also about the upcoming season. So we need to know that you work with so many guys. You've had cup parties there at Gary Roberts. You're going to have another Calder Cup party as well as your previous Stanley Cup parties. But with the acquisition of Karlsson the other day, as a diehard Penguins fan, I'm going to say coming out of the East with a vengeance this year is going to be Sid, remotivated Sid with Karlsson on the back end and Letang. Like, we're unstoppable. The Penguins are going to win the Cup. Who do you say?
It's got to be the Oil. Literally has to be the Oil this year. It has to be. Come on. Should have been the Oil this past year. All right, I'm quadrupling down on it. So I think we had Bush in the gym just coming for a day. They added Ekholm. You know, the back end's the back end is shoring up. I think that Soupy's going to find it, is my prediction. Okay. I love Jack. He's a lovely, lovely young man. I think that he's going to dial in his championship mindset. And they're deadly serious about it too. I don't know Leon as well as Connor, obviously, but I've gotten a chance to get to know him a lot better. He bought a house in Aurora, so he could be close to the gym to train. And he's more serious than I've ever seen him. For sure. Mm-hmm. So I think a motivated Leon Draisaitl is a scary, scary, scary thing.
Yeah. And can Connor have a better season than he had?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, but that's my pick. Oil.
That'd be a great final. Pittsburgh.
I would love to see that. It'd be amazing. That would be, the Poets would be, can you hear? My daughter's having a meltdown. The Poets would be, they'd be over the moon. Sid versus McDavid to close that out. Oh, yeah. I would love it.
Gary would be happy, and that's what matters in the NHL.
Oh, gee, yeah, he's still a big deal. They still, the Chuck Norris, Gary Roberts jokes are still huge in Pittsburgh. So, like, they just insert him with Chuck Norris all over the place. So,
good.
Guys, thank you so much. Amazing.
Yeah, Adrian, thanks for your time. If people want to take a peek a little bit what's going on at the Gary Roberts High Performance Training, I think obviously you guys have a great Instagram account where you share lots of videos and stories every day of some of the training that's happening, a website they can learn more about, and we'll just kind of push people that way if they're interested to learn more about yourself and the team there. And
yeah, it's perfect. GaryRobertsPerformance.com, and then Gary Roberts HPT is the Insta handle. So yeah, you can always reach out.
Awesome. Appreciate your time. Thanks for everything. Enjoy the rest of your evening being a dad and a husband.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Win All Day Everyday podcast, presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would ask that you follow us on our social media feeds so you can get weekly alerts when we drop a new episode. Plus, if you could leave us a comment and a rating so that other listeners can have the opportunity to hear about this podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. This allows us to grow our awareness of today's show and further episodes. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.